The Flower Shop. Chapter 13. Reassurance. Read by Paige Lindsay. Victor was called into Alexei's office first thing on Monday. "Is there a problem, coach?" Victor asked, the Bulgarian rolling from his tongue. Alexei laughed. "Why must there always be something wrong?" "No, I'm just here to have a chat." Victor felt a knotting sensation in his stomach and knew this couldn't be good. Alexei pulled a set of burgundy clothes from under his desk and slid them towards Victor. "This is Miss Granger's kit. I suppose you shall be seeing her, so I will give them to you." He eyed Victor knowingly. Victor sighed, knowing Alexei was going to find out sooner or later. "How did you know?" he asked, worried that dating a mediwitch would be against the code. "I saw you in the stone cauldron. Her eyes were filled with wonder as you spoke, and I knew." He chuckled, glad that Victor had found some happiness in his life. "Don't look so worried. It's fine. I'm a little jealous, if anything, and I know the boys are too." Victor grimaced, knowing the kind of comments he would receive. "Victor, don't let them drag her through the mud. She's too pure for that," he said with sincerity. Victor nodded, knowing that he would have to silence the vulgar whispers he heard in the locker room. "She'll need to wear these when we go to England for our friendly with the Chudley Cannons. I'm sure she's looking forward to it, seeing her friends again." Alexei smiled, ignorant of all that had gone on. "Yes, I am sure she is," Victor replied flatly. Alexei lifted an eyebrow, but thought nothing more of it. "Come on, we have training," he patted him on the back, pulling him out of the office. Hermione had been staring into space for the majority of her shift at the flower shop. She wondered what she was going to do when she travelled with the Vultures to London. She was positive she would see Ron, who played for the Cannons, and she knew Harry would be there to support his friend, accompanied by Ginny. What could she say to any of them? She was sure that Harry would plead ignorance about the letters, and the more she thought about it, the less it seemed like a Harry thing to do. But then she thought back to the cruel message that came with the Daily Prophet and sighed. Either Harry had changed an awful lot since she had last seen him, or there was more to all of this than she had originally thought. When she left the shop, Hermione was shocked to see Victor waiting for her. He was still in his kit, and a sheen of sweat still covered his face. He held a burgundy jumper in his hands that he tucked into her bag for her silently. "Is uniform for tomorrow," he said, taking her hand. She looked up at him curiously, and he sighed. "Alexei gave it to me to give to you. He knows about us," Victor said, with his head facing the cobbled stones. Hermione squeezed his hand, surprising him by giving him a peck on the cheek. "I'm so glad! That is one less awkward conversation to have," she beamed at him. He sent her a small smile in reply. "You are happy Alexei and the team know?" he asked her, and she nodded enthusiastically. "Of course, now maybe they will stop flirting with me," she chuckled, leaning towards him. She sensed an unease within him tonight that she had never felt before. "Victor, are you all right?" she asked, looking up at him with inquisitive eyes. "I don't know how to ask. I want to stay with you longer, but we are almost at your flat," he sighed, looking down at his feet. Hermione chuckled inwardly, touched that he was upset because he had to let her go. "Maybe you could stay with me for dinner, if you haven't got anything else planned, that is," she asked, hoping that he would accept. "I am so glad that you've asked. That is why I came to see you at the shop." He smiled down at her, getting back to his usual self. Hermione kicked off her shoes and threw her keys into the bowl by the door. She thought Victor might have asked her why she didn't use a spell to lock her door, but merely smiled at her strange muggle object and removed his boots. Hermione had planned on having leftovers once again, but now that Victor was our guest, she decided to prepare a casserole, something simple that she knew couldn't go wrong. "How was training today?" Hermione asked over her shoulder. She'd only healed 2 men for very minor injuries. She wasn't sure if that was a good sign or not. "It's tough. They go harder on me because they learn I caught you." She turned and pouted at his answer, to which he smiled and chuckled softly. "It's okay. It makes me a better player. I also say to the men in the locker room to stop speaking of you now that you are mine." He paused, regretting his last statement. He feared he had overstepped the mark by saying she was his. But she didn't seem to mind as she waltzed over to him and perched herself on the round oak dining table and placed her feet on the corner of his chair. "And what have they been saying?" she asked, swinging her feet still inches from the ground. Victor blushed a deep shade of pink, a rare sight, and rubbed a hand over his mouth. "I cannot repeat," he replied sheepishly. Hermione pouted and mewed as she begged once again. "Please tell me. They're talking about me. I deserve to know." Victor chuckled at the vixen, shaking his head, knowing he could not deny her anything. "They say they wish to lie with you," he barely whispered, and Hermione chuckled, running a hand through her hair. "Oh well, that can't continue. I am yours, not your team's, she said matter-of-factly, and Viktor felt his heart swell with pride. Although it was still very early in the relationship, she understood the depth of his feelings and didn't shy away from them as she had when she was younger. Before Viktor could pull her down onto his lap, she hopped off the table to go and fuss with dinner. It took a few moments for Viktor to regain his right mind, but when he did, he knew he had to ask Hermione a serious question. "What are you going to say to Weasley?" he asked as bravely as he could, and she turned to him sighing. "I don't know. I'm sure Ronald was involved in some way with the disappearance of our letters, but until I find out the whole truth, I will not condemn anyone, not even Harry." Viktor smiled, knowing that Hermione was a just person, not one to judge too quickly. "Will Potter be there?" he asked, wondering if he would take a trip from Hogwarts to see his friend play. "Yes, most definitely. I'm going to wait for him to be in his box and question him." Viktor nodded, understanding that this was something Hermione had to do. "I do not think he did it all by himself. It just isn't like Harry to be doing something so scheming. Someone else is involved, and I need to find out who it is," she said with determination, and Viktor smiled, glad that she was so set on solving the mystery of their missing letters. The dinner was excellent, and Viktor made a mental note to remind himself to ask her to cook in the future. They had sat on the sofa talking about what tactics the Vultures were going to use, and how Hermione hoped some of her old friends would be there. "Is it weird that I'm scared?" she whispered, after a moment of silence. "What are you scared of?" he asked her, stroking her hand. "Of being back in London, and seeing Harry and Ron again. I know I saw Harry not long before I left for Vratsa, but I haven't seen Ron since." Viktor pulled her onto his lap, and cradled her gently, his arms firm and safe around her. "No, you go through so much together. It's natural," he reassured her. "I will be there. Take strength from me," he said to her lovingly. She touched her hand to his face before throwing her arms around his neck, burying her head into his uniform. "Thank you. I know I shall be all right as long as you are there," she whispered to him, and he felt as if he were 18 again, holding the girl he cared for, consoling her, assuring her that she and her friends would be okay, and for the first time in years, he felt he could live in this moment forever, without a care in the world.